Welcome. E3 and EA Play is right around the corner, and wow, I am very, very tired of clickbait articles trying to sell you on old news. So while my channel is devoted to Dragon Age lore, let's take a minute to talk about Dragon Age news, specifically Dragon Age 4 and what little we know about it. This is just a collection of old news that has come out since Dragon Age Inquisition's release and seems to point at details, no matter how small, to the next Dragon Age game. If you're looking for new things, I suggest you head over to my Twitter where I will either tweet about or retweet important information. But with that, will Dragon Age 4 be at E3 or EA Play this 2018? No. This has been confirmed 3 different times over the past few weeks via Twitter. There will be no Dragon Age presence in this year's E3 or EA Play, and I would even wager before Anthem comes out at all. If you thought this or you heard some rumors about it, that's because there was some hope stirred up by Greg Ellis, voice actor for Cullen / the original Anders / various other NPCs in the series. He has made many tweets tagging #Cullenites and hinting at a project he was working on, with hints that sound very similar to voicing Cullen for Bioware again. The hype got so large that even Dragon Age devs stepped in to say whatever he was saying wasn't related to Dragon Age. As for why he would tag #Cullenites, it seems he tends to do that when he wants to get his fans' attention. Is Dragon Age 4 even in the works? Yes. First, a Dragon Age game has been repeatedly confirmed over the past few months, I would even say years. A lot of people and news articles have been so keen to point out that these confirmations sometimes don't technically say Dragon Age 4, so in theory, it could be a spin-off like a battle royale or card game, but that's not true. This is just clickbait tactics. There are plenty of sources that do use Dragon Age 4, and the devs are just trying to be coy about it, partly because they can't exactly announce it yet. Remember, the staff are most likely under NDAs about the game, which means they can't confirm any details about the game at all. This also means they can't deny fake leaks either, because if they started to deny fake leaks, it's possible one day a real leak does come out and then suddenly we know it's real because they aren't denying it. But what if the next game isn't Dragon Age 4, it's a spin-off? A while ago there was an informal poll about a Dragon Age Tactics game similar to Fire Emblem and XCOM, but that's all we know about that so far. Any teasing or hints to future Dragon Age title, as I said, have leaned into Dragon Age 4 and nothing about spin-offs. If one were to happen, it would seem to come out of nowhere completely. Mass Effect Andromeda wasn't great. Is that going to happen to Dragon Age 4? In short, I highly doubt it. First, a short explanation on Bioware. Bioware isn't just one singular office. At the moment, it's 2, one in Edmonton and the other in Austin. But there was a Bioware Montreal. This office was the main one responsible for many of the Mass Effect DLCs and Mass Effect Andromeda. I get the following information from the Jason Schreier article that came out about a year ago, which, as a side note, at the moment, Schreier seems to have the most reliable connections in the industry for inside information. So I do trust what he says is at least close to the truth, although I think there are some spins to promote more drama for the sake of clicks, because that's just how journalism works nowadays. No hate, I get that's just the reality. Bioware Montreal was the newest of the Bioware offices. Well, compared to the other 2 at least. Many fans like to refer it as the C team, although I think that's not a completely accurate statement. But while there were many experienced staff there, there was also a lot of newbies to the industry as well. And Mass Effect Andromeda was the studio's first real game. Andromeda was originally pitched in 2012 as a game for exploration, a game where the players could visit and explore hundreds of planets, but also have that Bioware character experience. The idea that it would have been was like Mass Effect meets No Man's Sky before that game was even out. And so they worked towards that, but as you can see, the pitch didn't make it into reality. Ended up a little over a year before the game was released, which they had to release it because there's only so much money you can pour into a game. They had realized that what they had built just wasn't working. It wasn't fun. So the game we got, Andromeda we have, are the pieces from the rubble of that old game. The game we got was basically put together in a year. All the while, many of the more experienced staff was moved over to Edmonton office to work on Anthem, a move that suggests that Bioware didn't trust Andromeda to work even if they wanted it to. And here is just a small crackpot theory. The devs wanted us to know, but couldn't tell us. Andromeda has a lot of Easter eggs to the Dragon Age series, but almost all of them are for Dragon Age 2, the least successful of the franchise. Dragon Age 2 is also famous for being made in a year thanks to a push from EA, and the rush job showed immensely. Now, why on earth would you put in Easter eggs to what is considered the worst Dragon Age game, while you could have added in ones from the more successful Game of the Year and also the newest Dragon Age title? Perhaps because the two were more similar than you think. Anyway, why won't this happen to Dragon Age 4? For starters, Bioware Montreal has shut down. Now, as a side note, this caused a lot of fans to worry about the state of Bioware, but have you ever heard of Bioware San Francisco? Bioware Mythic? Bioware Sacramento? Bioware Victory? No? Because these were all Bioware studios that opened and closed at one point. Now, many of them, including Montreal, still technically exist, but now are under a different label. So shutting down a minor studio isn't new, and it shouldn't make you worry. A lot of people like to blame EA for this fact, but a lot of major gaming companies do this too, like Activision. Look how many things Activision has killed. It's just not EA doing this. But a major problem with Andromeda was that it didn't know where to go, so it gambled on a new mechanic and lost. Dragon Age 4 doesn't have that problem. We pretty much know exactly where it's going. While there will probably be new mechanics to the game, it won't be as drastic as randomly generated plan is. That means more time to focus on the details and facial animations of the game. Anthem is responsible for Mass Effect Andromeda's death, so what about Dragon Age 4? Okay, so Anthem's only effect on Dragon Age 4 is that it's the reason it's been taking so long. But I would argue the statement that Anthem killed Andromeda. Andromeda doomed itself, and Bioware took part of the staff from a doomed title to work on something else. That's just business. Anthem didn't kill Andromeda, okay? So stop boycotting Anthem over that. Boycott Anthem over something tangible. From the Schreier article, we learned that Bioware is mostly all hands on deck for Anthem at the moment, which isn't new. A lot of devs have come out saying that this is a very common practice. Anyway, that means only a very small team is working on Dragon Age 4 at the moment, which I will touch on in just a bit here. Because Dragon Age 4 will be coming out after Anthem, I don't believe that it will hinder Dragon Age 4's production any. The main question people have been asking is, if Anthem fails, will Bioware shut down? I'm going to be completely honest here, this question is based on business practices, and I have a soft science degree, which is completely worthless here, so I've asked my podcast co-host, Jordan from the Exalted March, who does make a living with business, to talk about this in great detail.
If Bioware was going to fail anytime soon, we would be able to paint an accurate picture of how and why. And currently, we just can't do that. Not at this point in time, and not before DA4 is released. It's not impossible, but it is highly improbable, and here's why. Barring any controversy, scandal, or worldwide financial collapse, there's only one major Bioware-centric development on the horizon before Dragon Age 4's release, and that's the release of Anthem. Anthem is scheduled for release in the last month of the last quarter of EA's 2019 fiscal year, which is financial speak for March 2019. We don't know of an official release date for DA4, but I'd be surprised if it wasn't within the next 18 months, given what we already know. That's really important because essentially what I'll be arguing is that even in a worst case scenario, Anthem doesn't have enough time to kill DA4. In order to understand why this is true, we have to understand three things. 1. EA's measurement for success for titles like Anthem. 2. How fiscal year and fiscal quarterly earnings are tallied. And 3. What EA's expectations are for Anthem. For point number 1, I want to use a quote from EA Chief Financial Officer Blake Jorgensen in the most recent earnings call for EA. Quote, "We didn't use unit sales metrics for any of our titles, and as you've heard in the past, we're trying to move away from that. This is an example of how our business model has changed. Unit sales are much less indicative of long-term franchise health due to the significant power of our event-driven live services. Live services component is really the bedrock of our business, and while units sold to grow that are important, they become misleading in many ways to the street, and so we'll stay away from unit predictions for any titles going forward unless there's some unique reason for it." End quote. Jorgensen is basically saying EA doesn't measure success in units sold exclusively, but rather in how those units sold to drive live services revenue, essentially microtransactions. This is notable as it's a departure from how a game's commercial success had typically been considered in the past, but also particularly relevant to our topic today because it plays directly into point number 2. about how and when revenue is counted. The question Jorgensen was asked was about why projections seemed slightly low in fiscal Q4 2019, despite Anthem's release date and EA's supposed confidence in its quality. Jorgensen goes on to explain that most of the game's revenue would actually fall into the next quarter, Q1 of fiscal 2020. Quote, "In the case of Anthem, the real issue is the game will be shipped in the last quarter of the year and in the last month of that quarter. Meaning, we'll probably have limited restocking of the title even if it's extremely successful." End quote. Now, if we look at those two things together, we understand this. Anthem is going to be measured as a success or failure by how well it drives live services revenue, but moreover, that revenue isn't going to be counted until fiscal year 2020. EA's fiscal year ends in March, which means depending on how well Anthem does generating live services revenue, it can't even be considered a quote-unquote failure until Q1, Q2, maybe Q3 of fiscal 2020, which is spring, summer, and fall of calendar 2019. By the time we're getting to the end of calendar 2019, I'd be surprised if DA4 wasn't deep into the latter part of production, maybe even approaching a solid release date. It's just not enough time to kill the game or Bioware. Lastly, even if Anthem was incredibly underwhelming, let's look at the last part of Blake Jorgensen's answer. Quote, "Since it is new IP, we're being conservative in how we're thinking about it. We're very excited about the game, it's extremely unique, and I think players are going to really enjoy playing it. But we're careful not to put too large of a forecast in there, and clearly it will impact this year as well as next year as we not only continue to sell more into next year, but start rolling out the live services associated with that game." End quote. This is actually a good thing. EA is being reasonable and taking into account that Anthem, while promising, is a new and unproven IP. They're clearly saying it's going to be given time to draw in revenue, and hopefully in that time DA4 will come out and Bioware will have two back-to-back winners on their hands.
Now, I know many of you just heard microtransactions and vomited a little bit, but keep in mind that not all microtransactions are the same. While EA really messed up with the Star Wars games, remember that Inquisition had microtransactions as well within its multiplayer, which many of you probably don't even remember that it had. I also bet that many of you had those Avar and Canary item packs as well. Microtransactions aren't amazing, but it doesn't automatically kill a game either. I want to move on, but if you're interested in hearing Jordan and I talk a lot about microtransactions in Bioware, then head over to our latest podcast that touch on that subject. But the Bioware store closed. Isn't that bad? Well, yes, the Bioware store did close its internet doors, I guess. They did so because they're switching suppliers. There's been tons of complaints about their old supplier, how they ran business, items coming in very late, some items where people had paid deposits not being made at all, etc., etc. You can still buy Bioware merch on Sanshi, but it seems that Bioware just closed down their store because they were unhappy with how things were being ran. Not a sign of the company failing at all. I heard Dragon Age was rebooted and is gonna be an MMO. Well, no. Half of that is rumor and the other half is just bad word choice. This comes from another Schreier article that came out in January 2018. The article goes on to mention that his sources claim that while Dragon Age 4 will be focused on story and character, it will have some sort of live elements. People then exploded this to mean that it's going to be an MMO, but really it could mean almost anything. Now, is there anything else that says Dragon Age is going to get an MMO? No. There have been no other sources or anything other than fans speculating. It's entirely baseless, and I would say anyone quoting that it's going to be an MMO is just wanting it to happen. Now, after the Schreier article was released, Casey Hudson, current head of Bioware, tweeted out, "Reading lots of feedback regarding Dragon Age, and I think you'll be relieved to see what the team is working on. Story and character focus. Too early to talk details, but when we talk about live, it just means designing a game for continued storytelling after the main story." As for what that means, we aren't really sure yet. There have been tons of guesses as to what continued storytelling could mean, but keep in mind that it's all just guesswork at this point. As for rebooted, let's take a look at the Jason Schreier article and the 2 times that it was actually used. There are still small teams maintaining Star Wars The Old Republic and piecing together the next Dragon Age, which was recently rebooted, but the bulk of Bioware staff in both Edmonton and Austin are now on Anthem. This alone does make it sound like the Dragon Age series as a whole was rebooted, but let's look at the next time that word was used. The past year has been tumultuous for Bioware and involved some major changes to the studio. One was to reboot the fourth Dragon Age, which at the time was codenamed Joplin, according to two sources. There is a running theme here. Anthem's codename was Dylan. The goal, the sources says, was to implement more live elements into the game, although two of these sources stress that the next Dragon Age will still have a heavy focus on characters and story, whenever it does come out. Okay, so then it was just that Dragon Age 4 changed a lot in its direction to include more live elements. This can sound like a scary thing considering what happened to Andromeda, but keep in mind that change doesn't make a bad game. Take a look at Dragon Age Inquisition's original demo. This is incredibly different than the game we got. There was a lot that was cut in Inquisition to make it available for the older consoles, which is part of the reason why this choice and the cutscene with Varric ended up never happening. There have been countless stories of cut content from Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Inquisition that devs have talked about over the years, and with Dragon Age 4 still likely in the early stages of development, I don't think this is anything to worry about. But it does bring us to what live elements are. Unfortunately, it could mean almost anything, from just a more interesting multiplayer, live DRM like SimCity, or anything that includes the game being connected to the internet, like with Andromeda's app feature that lets you send out task forces when not in-game. So if you see anyone claiming that they know exactly what they're going to do next, like, oh, live elements means you're going to do X or Y or Z or whatever, the possibilities are so endless that at this point there isn't enough information to get excited over, at all. What about the staff changes? Yes, there have been a few notable staff changes in the past year since Dragon Age Inquisition came out. David Gator, the head writer of the Dragon Age series, left Bioware to work briefly at Beamdog. We aren't sure what he's up to now, but there are some rumors that he might come back, but those are just rumors at this point. Currently, Patrick Weeks, who has been on the series for some time and wrote most notably Solus in Inquisition and Mordin in Mass Effect, have taken over as the head writer of Dragon Age. Now, if you aren't as connected into the Dragon Age fans, there was mass chaos when Gator left, but after it was announced Weeks had taken his place, things calmed down a lot. Many hardcore fans trust in Weeks' work, and overall there is a sense that the series is in good hands. Mike Laylaw also left the Dragon Age team. He has gone on the records that this is only due to him wanting a change in his life, and not that he thinks Bioware is going under anything like that. Laylaw had been the creative director for most of Dragon Age Origins and all of Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition. As he has said, he decided to leave last year because the Dragon Age team wasn't currently in a major development process, leaving him an opportunity to leave while not majorly disrupting the game's development. At the moment, I have not been able to find if they have announced a new creative director, although as much of the company is working on Anthem, it's possible that they're just going to move most of that team to Dragon Age 4 after its release. But not everyone has left. Casey Hudson is now back at Bioware as the general manager. Hudson had worked as the project director for SWTOR and the Mass Effect trilogy, but briefly left to work at Microsoft. Alexis Kennedy, known for the new Cultist Simulator and Swin Lassie, is also working as a writer for the Dragon Age series. He's gone to say that he's working with a faction that hasn't really been explored yet, but also has a fascination with death. While some believe that he's writing for the Tevinter Imperium, I don't think it really quite fits the clues he has given. If anything, the Navaran Mortalitasi, which are mages that take care of possessed corpses housed in a giant fake city, sounds kind of more what he's going to be doing. But also keep in mind, when we do have major faces coming and going, the bulk of the Bioware team has remained the same. Games aren't made by a famous group of 5 people. It's made by a whole team. And the whole team is mostly still there. I don't think a lot of these changes are going to be an issue. But what about the leaks? For the past 6 months, it seems that there have been a small gush of people claiming to have information about the new Dragon Age series. 3 have gotten the most traction, and all 3 conflict with one another. I won't go point by point on any of the leaks, but if you have heard that the next game is called Dragon Age Retribution or Rise of Tiamat, fake. A human-only protagonist, fake. Solus will now be called Salos, a filter in the character creation that sets the PC sexuality, a tie-in with Dungeons and Dragons. Fake, fake, and also fake. While there has been leaks in the past that ended up being correct for previous Dragon Age games, they were not in this format. Believe me, if a leak comes out that even seems just a bit reasonable, you will hear me complain about it a lot on Twitter. At the very least, Dragon Age is very early in its production. If a leak were to happen now or any time before Anthem, it's likely it's going to be changed and rewritten to the point of it being unrecognizable when it comes out. Anything leaking at this point is an extremely rough draft that is probably yet to be edited. As advice, just ignore any leaks until we're about a year out from Dragon Age 4 being released. Have Have there been any hints about the content in Dragon Age 4? Yes-ish. Over the past 4 years, there has been a little bit here and there that have been tweeted out by the devs. For one, the game will be set in Tevinter. Even after a large, obvious hint at the end of Inquisition's DLC Trespasser, it has been again hinted by the devs in the past. Well over a year ago, Mark Dar tweeted out images of a red book with a strange symbol on the cover. Later he would tweet what's inside of the book, or at least part of it. Most of it is art we've already seen, but it also includes a costume lineup of things we haven't seen before. I talk about this more in my Dragon Age 4 predictions video, so check that out if you are curious about the costume lineup. But many fans have stated that they don't believe this is related to Dragon Age 4 because it includes a lot of older art. And honestly, I don't believe at all that you can make that assumption. At a guess, this book is something like a mood board or design document for the production staff. Using many assets they already have, the book could be filled with the basic plot, story beats they want to use, imagery they want to see, and much, much more. Why waste money on a new picture of elves if they just have one already? Why waste money on an image of just a new party members if they haven't even been made yet? Just use the old party to get the point across to the staff. This is for staff only, this isn't for us to see, so they're going to reuse images because it's cheaper to make. In short, if this isn't related to Dragon Age 4 in some way, I'm going to be shocked. There's also been a mismatch of Twitter posts about possible features like a character creation in the Dragon Age Keep, that fans just kind of pitched cool things and then the devs say, oh, that's really neat. But it all comes down to, yeah, it's a cool feature idea that would be cool to put in the game rather than anything solid, so I'm just not going to cover it. Weiss has made several jokes about the Souls romance ending in pain and the secret to DA4 being inside us all, although I think they're just jokes, so who knows if that pans out. Kennedy sent out this very vague emoji tweet that even I, with a very large background in Dragon Age lore, have no idea what it could mean. John Epler, the Narrative Presentation League in Dragon Age, had a great Twitter thread about Trespasser, which again cemented that one of the goals of Trespasser was to end the Inquisitor story, meaning that we won't be playing as them in Dragon Age 4. This one is a little bit out there, and I don't even know it's actually related, but a fairly unknown tweet by Epler reads that the veil thins but does not rupture. The Tine of Seven Bells is not yet at hand. The context doesn't actually relate it back to Dragon Age, but as it uses the word veil, some have taken it to be a hint towards Dragon Age 4. I think it's possible, although it might just be a reference to something that I don't know what it is. I thought there was some Dragon Age 4 news in HavenCon. Sort of. Earlier this year, HavenCon, which is a convention for LGBT+ gamers and geeks, hosted a bunch of Bioware employees. Soon after, a post on Reddit came out about someone's time at HavenCon and their conversation with the devs. A lot of the information was just interesting tidbits, like the original name for the series was Chronicle, but the fans went wild about it. Eventually the post was deleted by the person who posted it, saying that they thought that what they had written was being taken out of context and was just doing more harm than good. But was there any Dragon Age 4 news? Not really, only that it's probably very likely, hint hint hint, that the game is going to be set in Tevinter, which we already knew. So when is Dragon Age 4 coming out then? At this point, we have no solid dates other than after Anthem. It took 3 years to build Inquisition from the ground up, including using an engine that they haven't used before and therefore didn't have any assets for it. So in theory, if they restarted the project completely, at max we're looking at a 2023 release date. But that's if they were to have done no work at all, which we know isn't true. So if I were to take bets, and this is just completely my guess here because we just have no solid anything, I would say expect a teaser trailer near the end of 2019, an official trailer at E3 2020, and the game out by 2021. It could even be a little bit earlier than that, but I think Bioware wants to focus on Anthem for just a little bit after its release. Well, how am I supposed to get my Dragon Age fix for the next 3 years then? Other than restarting a new game every month like some people, there are new media tie-ins that are being made or soon to be released. 2 comic series, Knight Errant and Mage Killer, seem to follow a few new characters that looks like we might be seeing in the near future as companions. Knight Errant particularly seems to end at a spot that is perfect for starting back up in Dragon Age 4. If you don't want to buy each issue individually, a collection issue will be released later this year, this one having commentary by the writers. Another new novel is also coming out, Hard in Hightown by Mary Kirby. This is based on Varric's in-game novels that you can read in-game in Inquisition. Although the novel isn't out yet, from the publisher's website we know that it's going to be about 100 pages and will include illustrations. While this is much shorter than the average Dragon Age novel, it is longer than the Hardened Hightown version we had in Inquisition, so it will be interesting to see what has been added and changed between the versions. As for those of you who are skeptical about how important this is to the canon of the world, the in-game Hardened Hightown version does hint at a mysterious unknown group that is also hinted at in Inquisition, so it's possible that this novel could set up more about them for Dragon Age 4. This is all speculation though, and it's totally possible that this is just a fun little fan service novel. They're also re-releasing nicely bounded and illustrated versions of The Stolen Throne and The Calling, the first two Dragon Age novels. There are also rumors that this is the beginning of a collection that will include all of the Dragon Age novels, although they have not been announced at this time. And while that is all that's currently announced for the Dragon Age series as far as new media goes, it's likely that there could be more coming in the future. We still have possibly 3 years before the next game. They're going to want to keep us remembering that Dragon Age is a thing that exists. But what is the best way to keep updated with Dragon Age 4 news? Because information goes so fast these days, the best way to keep up with the news is to stay in tune with the fans, not really the journalists. Check out the Dragon Age subreddit and comments, which often has news before other major websites. There are also fan-run blogs and forums, YouTube channels, and Twitter accounts that focus on Bioware or Dragon Age news. Naturally, there is me, although I focus more on lore. I tend to retweet or tweet about news. Jordan from the Exalted March and I also run a podcast where we often talk about news regarding Bioware. And when he isn't on the podcast or in this video, Jordan has a lot of insightful videos on the more practical and business side of EA/Bioware, as well as interesting lore thoughts on the games itself. Jackdaw Journalism is a journalism student, so you're going to have to forgive him for that. But he has a channel that's almost the opposite of mine, focusing on news and sometimes lore. Then you also have some of the older veterans of the Bioware news scene, like BioFan and Ash, who have been fairly quiet as of late, but likely they'll start getting back up again once Dragon Age 4 gets more solid. Perhaps you even want to just skip the fans and just find information for yourself. Then I suggest following the devs on Twitter. They tweet interesting Dragon Age tidbits here and there, and likely will tweet more about it as time goes on. And with that, that's all we have on Dragon Age 4 news that at least I know of. If you're interested in more Dragon Age lore or hearing me read out Dragon Age Codex entries, you can see more on my channel. Or if my content doesn't suit your fancy, why not check out a few of these channels? Maybe you like cooking. Perhaps you like in-depth looks at Dragon Age writing. What about crazy editing, funny memes, I'm old, or just some solid art? We all miss the world of Thetis, and many of us are really impatient for the next installment, but while you wait, I really highly suggest that you take a look at what the fans are creating because of this world in this series. It's truly a wonder of the community and what we bring together. So I want to thank all of you for listening. Here's where you can find me on Twitter, Reddit, and Patreon if you so choose. And safe journeys, or as the people say, Duress Sherall.